morning, everybody, and welcome to MEGA-T 2023. This year, we are thrilled to announce the inclusion of seminars, and we are confident that these sessions will provide invaluable insight for key players in the transport industry. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Gavin Kelly from the Road Freight Association to come and welcome everybody to MEGA-T 2023.
Grab various mics as we walk across the stage. Well, welcome everybody to MEGA-T 2023. Really is a pleasure to be here, to have you around here with us. There are a couple of toesprake webinar speeches. I promise they're not political speeches, so they won't be that long, that we're going to do this year that are going to deal with trucking and what have you. And mine is looking at the future of trucking, and I've really just done an overview. So we see where we're going and what's been happening in terms of logistics around the world and in South Africa and how that affects South Africa. We need to understand that there are a lot of things happening in the world that affect us as a country, no matter how much we think we're right down at the bottom of Africa. So let's see how we can go. I don't think you're going to see much on the screen here. I don't think that really works very well in an outdoor presentation. And the presentation will be available. I know that Harry is doing it on the transport site as well, and this is being broadcast live as we go. So hopefully the guys who sell the oil at such an expensive rate will listen to what I have to say. I'm just going to quickly do a run through what the Road Freight Association is. There's sometimes some confusion as to whether we're a government organization or not, and I can tell you that that definitely we aren't. And then I'm going to take a look at some of the risks facing us. I'm sure many of you have, in various media and on various social podcasts, seen many things said around the road freight industry and things that are happening and how the industry is being affected. And obviously one of those is the price of oil, which over the last 4 days has been like a yo-yo. Those of you who are about 18 or 19 will remember what a yo-yo is, how it goes up and down, and that affects us tremendously. And then talking about a couple of things happening that really affect the state of logistics in terms of roads and rail and ports, and then looking at Africa and a bit of the future. So as I said, the Road Freight Association is not a government organization. Quite often you see the acronym, as you'll see all around you, RFA, and people think, well, that's similar to the RAF. No. Or similar to the FRA or things like that, government acronyms. So Road Freight Association is really the largest and most comprehensive national trade and employer association in the trucking industry. It's totally private, it's membership based, it's voluntary, which is one of the interesting things in South Africa, is that we don't have compulsory trade associations dealing with the various businesses in the sector. So for example, if you go to places like the United States, the UK, Europe, Australia, places like that, you'll find that if you want to operate in this sector, in the road freight sector, you must be registered with a trade association. And that goes to various other compliances like being registered with labor, with tax and things like that. I've just pushed the wrong button there. Okay. Get back there. The Road Freight Association has a number of members. We have 3 categories of members. We have operators, which are what you and I would normally call transporters or hauliers, and then we have associates and affiliates, and those are people who either provide services into the sector or those who support through research or consulting or brokering, things like that. We also have students and emerging operators or transport companies or logistics companies as members, and they don't have vehicles, and that's part of our developing of the industry and growing the industry going forward. As you might or might not know, that many times the students that are currently studying at universities are those that end up being part of logistics companies, driving those logistics companies. We've been going since 1975, and 88% of our members fall into the SMME category. It's about to call you Harry. We're not a profit-based organization, so every single cent that we get, we use in our projects. We do use surpluses to roll over to do various things. And I've said before, we are non-governmental, and we are staffed by individuals, highly skilled individuals, some who've spent many years in the transport industry, and none of us have transport companies at all, which is important. Means whenever we have a discussion, it's from an entirely individual base in terms of being non-partisan, and it's also from a non-involved, what is the term they use these days? You don't have any conflict of interest. So we help our members as we can. It's important to understand we're a membership-based organization, and that's what drives us. It's what the members require, what they need, and the assistance that they need. So this isn't about looking at a different sector or somebody else's requirements. It's about those members, those transport members. Let's have a quick look at what sort of sector are we talking about in South Africa. So currently on the vehicles on the road above 3,500 gross tons, GVM, there are about 2.7 million running around, sorry, less than that. Above that, there are about 400,000 running around. And sometimes you get this feeling that they're all on the same road at the same point at one stage if you look at the queues that you see happening. And I'm not going to read through all of these things. What's important to look at is operators, as we in our country call them, operators commonly called fleets around the world. And there are registered fleet operators, roughly about 16,000. And of those, there are 12,500, almost 13,000 private fleets, and then public fleets are 3,500 odd. What is the difference between those two, you might ask me? Well, private fleets are fleets which are run by an entity for their own transport requirements. So, for example, municipalities, the military, the police have fleets, and they're all registered on the national database, their vehicles are. Then you have those who move their own goods, they don't move anyone else's goods. So you will see a number of well-known retailers that have vehicles on the road, and for example, like ShopRite, Checkers, or Pick n Pay, or Woolworths, and they only move their own goods. They don't move anybody else's goods. That's what a private operator is. And you get those who move cements or steel, those types of things. Public operators is a company that basically has a truck and will move anything for anybody to anywhere. So that's what public means. So that really means in this country, we only have 3,500 general public, I'll move anything for you anywhere types of businesses operating. Some of them have one vehicle, and some of them might have 19,000 vehicles. But that gives you an idea that there aren't that many public operators in the country as people might have thought. In terms of some trends, we've seen a fair amount of increase in freight on the roads since that little event that nobody remembers called listeriosis. No, COVID-19. I don't know how many remember listeriosis, which was moenie die poloni eet nie. And I've heard that one's coming back to give us a shock as well. So since COVID-19 has slowly receded, there are countries around the world that believe it's still there and they're still trying to sell their PPEs. But since that has receded, we've seen a fair amount of growth, and we've seen on two of the major routes, and those two major routes are highlighted because they go to three of our biggest ports in the country. So the N3 and the N4, taking a fair amount of transport and freight from Africa to the north of us, especially the N3. And we've been seeing an increase of 17% year on year in terms of growth. And those figures we got from C-Track. So you see that it's growing. And that's important for not only our economy, but for the sector. And the forecast, those guys who do the number crunching, and they reckon that we're going to see a 6% compound annual growth rate over the next couple of years in the sector, which again is great for the sector. For those of us who are concerned about how we move the stuff through the ports, and what the conditions of the roads are like, that's a bit of a worry. And that forecast is through to 2029, which isn't that far away. I hear it's next year. Well, the way at which time flies, it almost seems to be like right on us. So we can see that there is a good forecast for the growth of road freight, both within South Africa and within the southern part of Africa. There are some very busy slides here, and I'm not expecting you to read all of these, but an important thing to understand about the future is that there are 14 freight corridors that are developing or being developed or upgrading in a way that has a major impact on how we do business in South Africa and on the types of volumes of freight that will move through our ports. And if ever I get to a stage where I do sound a bit like a politician, this is the one thing that we've been raising with the ministers of transport, trade and industry, and there's this national logistics crisis committee that was created by the president, where we have put up a number of warning flags and tried to get those who make the policy decisions and the national infrastructure development decisions to understand that South Africa is competing with the world, and some of those very, very strong competitors are our neighbors. They might not look like they have a huge army, or we might have half of their citizens living in our country, but those countries are all competing on an international stage, and unfortunately, whether we like it or not, the bottom line is efficiencies followed by the actual rate that you charge. But if you're efficient, then business will move through you. So once again, I said I'm not going to read through all of these, but you need to understand, for example, that Angola is developing a whole new set of harbors. And why would that be a worry for us? Well, because a fair amount of freight then will divert roughly around DRC, Zambia, and head straight to the port almost on a horizontal line, because their ports operate far more efficiently and have far shorter dwell times than what our current ports of Durban, Richards Bay, Cape Town, and Kucha are doing. In terms of growth, I've spoken about how that is growing. So you can imagine that if we've got 70% compound growth on the N3 and the N4, and we get those ports operating properly, you might see that growth figure increase. In actual fact, for those of you who've been into the eastern side of the country, you would have seen huge development on the N4, running from Mbombela or Nelspruit through to Komatipoort, through to the port of Maputo. Now that's an interesting development that has an immediate effect on the N3 and the types of volumes on there. Good thing I'm standing far away from there. Let's go on to the crime risk part, and that's probably one of the biggest challenges that we are facing in the sector right now, is the risk that the day-to-day operations are being faced with. And if you look at, and there are going to be a couple of slides, again, very, very busy slides, and you'll be able to get these to read at your own leisure. But if we look at the amount of attacks that have happened, and we get the reporting from our members and various other sources, we've gone from roughly 6,500 incidents in a year in 2009 to where we are now. We compiled this report in July, so we've still got a couple of months to add to this, and we're not yet finished as 2023. Already at 21,000 incidents in the year. And there are a number of reasons for that. Obviously, one of the reasons is there are far more vehicles on the road. You can always use that argument, but there are a number of other reasons for that. And one of those is the total collapse of our policing security authorities. There's no other way to put it. There's no nice way to put it. That's what's happening. And what drives these incidents? Well, it's the so-called foreign driver matter, which is contentious in its own right in terms of how that's arrived at. There is looting that occurs at an incredible rate, and I'm sure many of you are aware that the social conditions in the country, the tough financial climate, the shrinking of available jobs, there have been many business closures. You know what's happening out there, and some of this looting is just basic, everyday, try to stay alive type looting. So lots of foodstuffs that are being targeted that people need to survive every day. It isn't necessarily cell phones, televisions, and the like. You would have heard in the media a lot of talk around criminal syndicates the looting or the attacks on road freight isn't just something that happens at a stop street or haphazardly. There are syndicates that target either specific commodities, so the cargoes, and there are setups and whole systems to sell that in systems almost akin to like what our retail stores are. And I'm not saying our retail stores sells the stolen stuff. I'm saying that the sophistication in the planning in terms of getting the stolen goods either out of the country or sold through illegal or illicit processes in the country is actually very well developed. There's a lot of protest action, and I think we're going to see a huge increase on that as we head towards the elections in 2024. That's just how it goes. What is interesting on our radars, we've noticed that already there's been an increase in cash and transit heists. And as we all know, they always tick up when you head towards instances like elections, strangely enough. There's industrial sabotage becoming a very, very big thing where competitors take other competitors out to ensure that they have control over their sector. There are incidents where there are crashes. Lots of crime happens there when the trucks are immobilized, they can't move, they're stuck in queues. You find looting starts to happen there. Drivers get attacked. Then we have road rage, also increasing. I don't know how many of you have your baseball bat hidden under your front seat. And then, of course, there's always the driver unhappiness part where drivers are and can become complicit. And the risk really is around a number of things. The first is that there's little or no consequence of what's happened on the roads if you perpetrate violence or attacks. So you will remember it's probably about 6 years ago now, those first attacks done by an organization then called ATDF on various vehicles around the country where drivers were killed, maimed, seriously injured. We have yet to see any sort of result of investigation and of people being held accountable and receiving the cognizant penalties for what they've done. We haven't seen any of that. There's very, very little consistency in policies, so you find that the protests just repeat. So one of the issues was around foreign driver. Number of suggestions were made. The RFA was very clear on how you can deal with this, but they just haven't been implemented. So a lot of things just come to visit us continuously, and you'll hear that in the rhetoric of many of those organizations. I've spoken about diminishing employment that drives that, and then of course, whoopsie, there goes the next one, no effective policing. Now I don't expect you to be able to read that, but you will probably get a good idea if you look at from the left-hand side to the right-hand side of that graph of how incidents are just increasing, and these are syndicates. So in 2009 we had very few syndicates. Now you have common talk around the cement syndicate and the spare parts syndicate and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You need a pair of binos to read that if you're going to see that. In terms of incident per route, so they're the routes, and again, the worrying thing is that it's just increasing. There doesn't seem to be any real drive on behalf of the authorities to address the causes. Often we address symptoms, we just don't address the causes. Incident per day, and I spoke about that earlier on, 6,500 a day to the 23-odd thousand we're at now. Again, the graph just a couple of weeks ago, and they just sat there with eyes like deer caught in the headlights. And one of the comments was, but that doesn't match up to our CAS numbers. So when incidents are reported at police stations, you get a CAS number. And the reason for that is because the guys have given up on the SAPs. It's no good going and reporting there if you know nothing's going to happen. So a lot of guys deal with it themselves. Truck hijackings, yeah, they've also increased, as you can see. And it'd be interesting if any of you have an idea of what the number one hijack commodity in South Africa is. If you think you know what it is, we can chat afterwards. But I can tell you it's not fuel, it's not TVs, and it's not cell phones. Right, let's have a look at where we're going in terms of road, rail, and the ports. And from now on, I think you need to have something strong next to you, a strong whiskey or a strong brandy, or smoke a good cigar, because it becomes a tale of woe. And often the road freight sector is blamed for so many trucks on the road. And the reason why there's so many trucks on the road is because there ain't no trains on the rails. And if we're going to move the stuff, we've only got 3 options. The first option is via truck. The second option is via air, and you can imagine how heavy those planes would be. And the third option is using a device used on the Starship USS Enterprise, where you materialize one thing here and you push a button and somebody says, "Beam me up, Scotty," and it then appears somewhere else. And until that technology has been developed, we're not going to get anywhere near getting away from road, unfortunately. And you might say, well, why is the Road Freight Association saying unfortunately? It's because we can't sustain it. And what we need to understand is that when road freight collapses, we're deep in trouble in South Africa. So we need to ensure that we get other partners to play. So a couple of things here on this slide you're going to see now, you definitely will be able to see. But I just want to do a couple of stats. So we've seen a reduction in the Eastern Bulk Ore Line. Most of us know that as the Richards Bay Coal Line, but its official title is the Eastern Bulk Ore Line. We've seen reductions of volumes, efficiencies by 50% over the last couple of years. The Western Bulk Line, so they run to Saldanha, they do the manganese and the iron ore, and that have dropped by 17% in 2021 and a further 6% in 2022. So that's 23% all in all. A little bit more, but 23%. We've seen huge destruction of the overhead cable and the railway lines. I have not seen scenes like this apart from in these movies that you watch, where they show you the world, what it looks like after the apocalypse. And then, literally, the agricultural side has collapsed. Most of the major grains these days are moved by truck. Those sidings and those sorts of rail links have all but disappeared. So what does it mean? It means currently we see 3,500 coal trucks a day increase on the eastern side of the country, and 2,500 chrome manganese type truck increase on the western side of the country, onto the roads that we try to maintain or try to keep going. Then the manganese truck's about 1,500, and the same, it comes around the agricultural, around the Free State and Northwest and those agricultural areas. So what are you seeing? You're seeing a huge increase on vehicles on the road, and of course the roads not being able to take it. So that gives you a good idea of what's happening on that eastern coal line, where they should be doing 80 million tons, they're now down just on 40 million tons. It's all going to road. These slides give you an idea of what's happening in terms of capabilities, capacities with rail, where it should be and where it is and where it's going. And you must forgive me if I keep harping on this, because it is a crucial part of what is happening in South Africa that we need to fix. You can see the same story happening in terms of, for general bulk, what we need in terms of trains and where we are. 36% less than what we require to move in terms of rail. Once again, to our good friends at C-Track, having a look at the difference between road and rail, and look at that gap. And I dare anybody to tell me what they think the amount of money is we're going to have to put in to close that gap. Now, I don't think we're talking hundreds of millions here. We're not. And the problem is some of those railway lines we're really going to have to fix. And the ports, you would have seen for the first time in the last 30 odd years, is we now have this collaboration. We've got a private partner coming into one of our ports from Singapore, the Philippines, coming in to run. And if we don't get that right, we're really, really going to be stuck if we cannot get boxes out. So the Port of Durban, for example, you have this ludicrous scenario where they move a container up to, but the average is 4.5 times. I don't know which half of the box doesn't move, but anyway, 4.5 times to move a box in the port. And we can't do that. Everywhere else around the world, the box will move twice. It'll move once off the ship, if you want to include that as a move, and then once out. So you must evacuate your port as quickly as possible. That gives you an idea of what's happening between the ports, the types of volumes, and where we've been going. And all of those figures have been heading south. I know we're at the south of Africa, but that's not the type of figure we want. We need to turn these around. We've had huge constraints in terms of vehicles. We are a big exporter of vehicles. There's a huge financial impact on the vehicle market around the world. There just isn't the money for vehicles. I'm sure all of you have seen in the last 18 months, 2 years, and I'm not punting any specific product, you would have seen the amount of Chinese vehicles that have entered the South African light motor vehicle market. They're in the truck market as well, but in the light motor vehicle market. And why are there so many here? It's for two reasons. The first reason is they can keep that product cost down relative to their competitors. And secondly, it's getting it here that they're very good at. So that is very, very important for us in terms of moving our freight. We do about 9,000 containers a day here and there. The average is about 8,500, 600. So that gives you an idea of the types of containers, boxes moving in and out. I've spoken a fair amount about rail coming on, and I've had a number of people asking me, so aren't you worried that once rail comes into play, we're going to lose jobs, the road freight market will shrink, and that will be the end of the sector? That's not true. There are potential job losses in certain areas. There are potential job losses. It depends on the type of cargo and the type of operation. But of course, one needs to understand the end-to-end logistics in the network. And there are always going to be places where rail cannot get to, even in some of the commodities that are running now. So some of those long hauls might end up being a shorter haul, and what the Americans generally call a haul to a railhead, we call railhead sidings. So you'll find that you're going to maybe move where you operate. You won't do long hauls per se. It'll be the different style of operation. Still, hopefully using the same assets. We have an incredibly high demand for freight. We're at 500 billion tons kilometers in the country, so there will always be plenty of work. It depends on how you're going to do it. And a good example of that is over the last 5 years, and definitely driven by COVID, you would have seen a change in the way in which goods are shipped to customers. And customers in a lot of our large retail centers and a lot of our large shopping malls are facing the so-called, so that I don't give a brand name, the so-called 2020, but you know what I'm talking about. The so-called little motorbikes running around, moving the goods to the doorstep. That had a huge impact, and a lot of companies that were involved in that logistics adapted. So it's going to be that well-known phrase by Peter Dirk Ace many years ago, adapt or die. It's going to be the way in which you move your logistics that will count. And you've got to have your finger on the pulse to understand exactly how it works. There will always be a multimodal approach. There is no way that we can, with rail, facing what we have to fix, are going to be able to just develop rail so that rail is everywhere. There are so many challenges to that. Most importantly, having access. So, for example, think about that development at Allendale Road, which is Century City, and that whole area around there, and the amount of people who live there. Why isn't there a rail link in there? And now to put a rail link in there, like a Gautrain-styled rail link or a suburban rail type link, is going to require expropriation of land. It's going to require a huge amount of development and money that just isn't there. So there will always be buses in that case, short buses, as in medium, midi buses moving people to perhaps rail links, to sidings. So freight will always be the same thing. There will always be dysfunction in rail unless there's a coordinated private sector involvement. So, for example, getting the mines involved or getting agri involved in terms of their peaks and their lows. So that has to happen. And there will be jobs in that because the road freight sector has many people involved in those styles of businesses, and that would only be a move from one mode, from rubber on road to steel on rail. So job losses are probably going to be actually quite minimal. And at the end of the day, there will be a transition that will take years to happen. Rail is not going to suddenly be working in 2024 or 2025. It's probably going to take a 15 to 20 year period to get the main corridors back up and running as they should. So there will be a transition of skills and plenty of work for everybody. The joint ventures at the terminals, this graph just shows where we've been going and what others look like in terms of joint ventures. So we've had a continual reduction in the throughput of our ports, which we need to turn around. The recent Transnet strike, when I say recent, that was June, July, had a huge effect on our ports. And in some cases, we're still dealing with backlog, not necessarily the actual box in the port, but in terms of long to medium term movement through the ports. I'm not going to speak around that one. The second one, or the next point, is managing drivers. A very crucial part of road freight logistics. We have a shortage of experienced, good drivers for a number of reasons, and one of them is poaching. Foreign country poaching. We lose a lot of our drivers to foreign countries, and we lose a lot of drivers within the region as well, because experienced drivers who ensure that your assets are looked after, that the goods of your customer get to the point, and that they drive in a way that doesn't destroy your asset, are like hen's teeth, I think the saying is. So we have a shortage of well-trained, experienced, safe drivers. And the challenge is to grow our drivers and our base of drivers. Most of our drivers have been in the business for quite some time. And if you look at the average age, you get a shock. A fair amount of those drivers are heading towards the age where they're going to have to put white sticks on the front of the truck because their eyes might not be so good anymore. And there's some very good programs around that look after drivers. And I'm not speaking to gender, both male and female. We need drivers, but we need to grow drivers. And one of the reasons that we struggle is we don't have a central database that we can access. So those in the business can't get to a database to see who G.A. Kelly is and what the experience is, etc., etc. We don't have centralized databases that ensure that drivers do the compulsory training and the refresher training and the special skills training. We don't really control movement between companies, and not that we would want to do that, but one needs to understand in terms of that database why they move. And then obviously you want to have some sort of a filter that pulls out the dangers in that database. But there's a lot of resistance to this. And around the world you'll find that other freight systems operate because they've got, or operate better or at a higher level or with less risk, because they are able to manage their drivers far better. So that's something that the association has been speaking to the Department of Transport for at least the last 20 years, in terms of how do we sort this out with driver databases. And there are lots of solutions out there. There are lots of guys ready to get involved in that. But again, it's dealing with the driver shortage. And there is that. Age and illness, skills, foreign recruitment. And of course, many people don't see freight as a career. They don't want to start off as a driver. They want to be the scheduler or the manager right from the very beginning. And many of you sitting here today, I'm sure, know that in whatever business you were in, the best way to learn about the business is to start where the operations are and to work your way through. And hopefully it doesn't take forever and ever and ever. We have some campaigns that we run where we acknowledge drivers, and right now we've just gone through the Thank You Trucker campaign, where we try to highlight the good drivers, because it's so easy for many people to point fingers and say, well, you know, all our drivers are bad, blah, 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 look how they drive. It would be interesting if we couldn't, I must actually speak to our member who's involved in this. Should we ever go down the route of a thank you light motor vehicle driver? I wonder what sort of nominations we'd get for that, as to how many guys are driving as they should drive. And I don't know how many of you have been in a truck, driven down the M1 in peak hour in the morning, and you need to change lanes, and you start signaling. I mean, I've done it many times, and 3.5 kilometers later, nobody's given you a gap yet. You know, so very, very important people, very important that those who support us in raising this as important is out there. I often get asked, so around the world, how do you compare South Africa to around the world and the Freight Association, and what do they do there? Well, there are a couple of lessons we can learn, and we have had the idea that the Department of Transport is going to go along this route. We had a good discussion with her at our recent convention. We've had a number of follow-up meetings, and hopefully we're going to go here, although in the last couple of weeks there have been some funny statements coming out of the Department of Transport, but let's leave that where they would be. But we really need to make sure that as independent associations as around the world, that one of the greatest causes of crashes, which is vehicle maintenance, call it roadworthiness, is tightly monitored. For example, in the UK, you have to submit those schedules to the Truckers Association in the UK, which is called the RHA, the Road Hauliers Association, and all of that is done outside of the process. If you get stopped along the road, either for being in excess of weight, which is the UK term for what we call overloaded. I'm never sure when they say in excess of weight, they're talking about the truck or the driver, but when you're in excess of weight, or you're found to have issues with your vehicle, as they call them, CORs, that gets reported to the RHA, and the RHA will then take you on, and if you have more than a certain number in a year and or you don't fix these issues, they actually withdraw your operating license. Now that's interesting. I'm not so sure I'd actually want the RFA to play in that role, but it's interesting how a lot more focus is done by the industry and the sectors themselves in terms of managing some of those key issues. So for example, vehicle maintenance, one of the things the RHA does is if you buy a truck, and we had one of our members here early on, so I'm going to use their name if you don't mind, Martin, just hide under the table. If you buy a truck from Iveco, what happens is the RHA actually pings Iveco on the maintenance schedules of those vehicles. So it's a far tighter scenario there than what we have here. Incident and crash recording. Every morning when I wake up, I'll start the day with at least 15 to 20 messages on our crash WhatsApp group of crashes that have happened. And these are only freight. This is not light motor vehicles and other such things. But we don't record that here. We don't have a central database that allows us to see what happens, and more importantly, what the causes were and how we addressed those. We're very good at addressing symptoms. So how do we know there was a crash on the N3? There were 23 kilometers of queue. And then everyone works to get the queue going. But we actually don't do that research into why the crash happened. And in South Africa, we only do research in an incident that involved 5 or more vehicles, or where there were 5 or more deaths. Cross-border accreditation, so we've got queues at some of our border posts. If we get AEO working, and we are now busy with a pilot program, you will have green routes running where you can actually skip those borders or run through without being stopped. Obviously, there's always the other side, the other country, that we need to bring into that whole play, but hopefully that can be resolved pretty quickly. We have some challenges, and that is that we have 9 provinces, and the provinces have the power to override national legislation through exemptions. Sometimes it works for us, and sometimes it doesn't. And it's finding that nice balance between the two. So, for example, we've seen a couple of issues where National Minister got upset with somebody down in the Western Cape for impounding taxis. Well, believe it or not, the Western Cape has both the legal right and the mandate to do that. They are responsible. And now and then we have a little bit of confusion between that. Representation is very important. Who actually is lobbying and pushing for certain things, and what's the interest? And then finally, and you'll hear me talking about it again and again and again, is that provincial registration of operators is very, very weak. If you get hold of the MEC in Gauteng or KZN, anybody, and you put them on a spot and say how many operators in your province, they won't know. And we need to know that. And we need to know which are the compliant or the troublesome ones. Once again, rather a busy slide. RTQS is what we're about. It's about quality within your operations and managing your operations. And You can be certified in terms of RTMS and various other standards. The important thing is breaking it up into digestible bits and dealing with the bits and pieces. And we've got plenty of people that can help you in following that piece or that process. Often, transporters or the road freight industry is referred to as an unregulated industry. We have 25 pieces of legislation that affect us, not just the National Road Traffic Act. If you're moving perishable goods, you cannot believe the types of hoops that those operators need to jump through. Very, very, very tough. So there is a fair amount of policy out there. What we just need to do is to make sure people comply, and that those authorities who are responsible for ensuring that compliance actually do their job. That graph just shows you that even in amongst all of this policy, the biggest chunk is what sectors and operators place on themselves through their own in-house policies, or policies that somebody who loads or offloads fuel, or perishable goods, or edible goods, or dangerous goods requires operators to meet with. So it's not a national policy, it's a policy from somebody like an oil major or a major producer of goods, of foods. I said I'd speak about Africa. Africa is growing at a tremendous rate, and the countries around us are growing far quicker than what we are, and we're going to have to meet that challenge. The SADC, the South African Development Community, has approved $17 billion recently in natural gas infrastructure plans. We need to be part of those sorts of things. We hear about the BRICS Development Bank, and that we might have a BRICS currency. We're not quite sure how that will work. Will it work the same way that the euro worked, where the Germans got €1 for 1 Deutschmark? But the so-called PIGS countries, if you remember that term, PIGS countries, Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain gave 100 of their whatevers, or 1,000 to get €1. So we're not sure whether when we go to BRICS, will the currency be called a brick? And because we're strong, we'll get a whole brick. Namibia will get a half a brick. Botswana might get a quarter brick, and the Zimbabweans will get some chips. We're not quite sure how that's going to work. But what is important is that the BRICS Development Bank is pushing through huge amounts of money to do development. And again, something that has a lot of potential in terms of road freight, in terms of construction. So you see there's the Trans-Caledonian Tunnel. That's 3.2 billion rands of development there. And we're looking across the countries closest to us. Their growths are between 4.6%, Mozambique's 4.7%, Zambia's 50 basis points to 10% in growth. It's actually huge growth happening around us. Zimbabwe's inflation eased from 100% to 72%. Opportunities in Africa, plenty of opportunities. You see all of those bits and how they're growing. Logistics in Africa is where our future lies. And if you think about the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, how that is going to place huge pressures on our ports and on you, the transporters here in South Africa, and on your businesses. So there's plenty of opportunities in Africa. African companies spent 2.6 trillion on business-to-business services in 2015. That's the latest figures we could get, and that's going to continue to increase, and you can imagine what the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is going to do in terms of that. So plenty of opportunity. South Africa is seeing the growth of megacities. So soon, I think they're already joined really at the hip, but places like Johannesburg and Pretoria, or Egoli and Tshwane, are going to be single megacities, and that's going to happen all around South Africa and in Africa itself. And once again, huge opportunity for development there. Last couple of slides. I've only got 104 slides left. So slide 103. The one thing that you need to understand going into the future is that you need to understand that you need data. And you need to know where to get that data, and more importantly, how to use the data. these little things that we have in our pockets called cell phones and what have you, stream an incredible amount of data to us on a daily basis. But the important thing is to understand how to use your data. You're getting data from your tracking company. Do you use it only to know whether your truck is missing? Or do you use it to understand what's happening in your business and how that data can help you to become more efficient and get that load there or quicker or cheaper? So it's important how we use data. And that's just a little thing there saying we've got to understand what data means to us. Do you have the fear of missing out? That was my young daughters that told me what FOMO was. I thought it was like OMO, just with far more vuma. If you fear of missing out, then you need to join someone like the RFA. We can put you into contact with many of our affiliates and associates, from tracking companies to fuel companies to parts companies to OEMs. So, join an association, be an active member, find out what's happening. On the 28th of September, we were at $97.31 to the barrel, 19 Rand to the US dollar. Last night, we dropped to $88 a barrel. We haven't yet got the Rand to 3 to a dollar, but we're working on it. And I didn't mean 300 or 3,000. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. I hope you enjoy Mega T. We look forward to seeing you around. Thanks so much.
Good morning, everyone. Well, this is the smallest crowd I have ever spoken to. Just waiting for a couple of people to take their seats. Thank you very much, Gavin. Thank you for enlightening us on what's happening in the industry at the moment. I'm going to try and lift that energy a bit with something a little bit more positive. Yes, so I am Nikki Scott Anderson. I have just only recently adopted the Anderson. Although I've been married for 22 years, I never took my husband's surname. And I think after like 20 years of marriage, or maybe even 21, I finally decided he deserved that. So that's where the Anderson comes from. Many of you just know me as Nikki Scott. I am very proud to be here, to be chatting to you. Catherine, you promised me you would rent a crowd. I don't see them. I know if you go at the back there. So, hello. So let's get going, guys. I'm going to do my utmost not to confuse you, because unlike Gavin, who has the privilege of managing one association, I manage 1+2 companies. And they all feed together, and they all work together for what I consider to be my absolute passion, which is driver health and wellness and road safety. For those of you that have heard me speak before, you will know that I've told people that I'm a truck driver. And I spent my entire childhood, teenagehood denying it. I mean, as a white family, there was nothing to be proud about to have a dad as a truck driver. It put you into a category. And all I did through my years was to try and get out of that, to try and be something different. And I fought so hard to be anything but the daughter of a truck driver. And you know what? What you resist persists. I ended up starting a logistics company and employing 250 truck drivers. And yeah, I think Dad was around then. When Dad passed on, I then started looking at driver development, and that was the start of the Commercial Transport Academy. Driver development with Eugene, who will be chatting just now, is really so important. As Gavin also mentioned, we have many drivers who are registered to drive, but we are dearly lacking in capable and skilled drivers. And one of the biggest challenges is, yes, I mean, globally, we, as truck drivers go, we battle to maintain, as an industry, the any sort of like glory, or what's the word I'm looking for? Joy almost about becoming a truck driver. It's not sort of the career that is really publicized on the career days at school. It's something you could almost land in when you didn't find anything else to do, and that's been the history. And I think it's so sad, because there are people that absolutely are passionate about being commercial drivers. They love their vehicles. They thoroughly enjoy working within the organizations that they are employed by, and they just love the open roads. And I see this all the time. I'm on one of the Facebook groups, actually the biggest Facebook group for commercial truck drivers, and they'll take a picture and they will say, where am I in South Africa today? And then everyone will start commenting on the pass that they're driving through or the area of South Africa, and it is so beautiful when you see it from their view. But sadly, the industry has sidelined women, and I'm very nervous about talking about women in this environment, because I've come to learn that there are certain spaces that pushing for more women to enter the sector is not really as encouraged as in other platforms and conversations. But I'm going to say it as it is, and if you don't like what I'm saying, by all means just ignore me. But women have not been excluded from the transport sector, and we're not just talking about truck drivers here. We are also talking about bus drivers, couriers, entrepreneurs, and right into the executive role because of legislation. It's just been a mindset issue. There's a lot of transporters that don't believe women belong in the industry. I spoke to one just this week that said, hell no, women are double trouble. Everything he has to do, he has to inflate in cost to keep women on the road. He will never employ women. This is not the industry for him. I think if I'd asked him about women in rugby, I would have got the same opinion. But there are definitely people that do not believe that women belong in certain areas, and that's fine. I'm not here to say that women belong in every area of the transport sector, because there are areas that are really very challenging. But where we can, we have to ask the question, why not? And how will we ever know if the industry can change for the positive by having more women if we don't try? So I encourage the operators that are here, the OEMs that are here, the associations and affiliate members, please speak to us. We have over a budget to develop over 695 women truck drivers, which we've started 2 years ago, and we're doing amazing things. We're seeing women being adopted in all sorts of industries. So there's no norm. I thought they would sort of move towards the petroleum industry. That's not the case. We've seen them in the side tippers, taut liners, long haul, local, courier, refrigeration. It's really very diverse. The motorbike drivers we're developing, 100 motorbike drivers to look at the e-commerce industry. We know this is very dominated by the foreign nationals that are in our country at the moment. And there is a place for our youth. Our 19 to 25-year-olds that are battling with employment would be perfect in this environment. And that is a program we're busy working with as well, and we're really looking forward to how that's going to roll out. But besides that, guys, anyone here thinking about ESG should be talking to the CTA, because everything we are doing fits perfectly into your ESG strategy. From the development of your staff, the upskilling, the whole upward mobility strategic plan that you should be already implementing, to the environmental issues that we are looking at. And most of all, the program that the CTA runs ticks the box on 8 of the Sustainable Development Goals. These are the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And that's important, because without some sort of goal and some sort of alignment to a body as big as the UN, it's almost impossible to change the state of human dignity and the lack thereof. And that brings me to where our drivers are sitting. When we realized that we were going to have a challenge bringing women truck drivers into the industry without proper truck stops, without truck stops that support the basics of just having proper ablutions, proper showers, safe parking, drivers not being harassed at night by sex workers, by gangs that operate around the truck stops, we knew we had to do a deep dive into the state of truck stops in South Africa. And that exercise happened last year. And when we went back to USAID, who is our primary funder for our programs, we then realized that if we didn't get external funding, because South Africa would struggle to find it, it would be impossible for us to launch a new association that would look at the truck stops. USAID gave us funding, which we believed would cover the first 8 to 9 months to launch the Safer Stops Association, which happened on the 13th of July this year. And what is going to happen is, over the next 8 months, we are busy putting all the legal frameworks in place, putting the steerco in place, So I'm going to take you through now the slideshow around safer stops, because I believe that if the industry can get behind the Safer Stops Association, everything else that the CTA is doing, everything that Zolabix is doing around compliance will all make sense. So let's get going to this. Safer Stops is a non-profit company. It's already registered. We're just waiting for our Section 18A to be issued. It is leading the implementation of the only public-private partnership initiative that will be benchmarking and establishing a national framework for high-quality truck stops and rest stops. So the difference between a truck stop and a rest stop, in our opinion, is a rest stop doesn't have fueling facilities. Great parking facilities, restaurants, and all of that, but they won't have an oil company there. This is an incredible ESG initiative. Our vision is a future where every journey is a safer journey for all road users. I don't know how many of you have got to the point where you're actually quite nervous of driving alongside a big truck and trailer. You don't know whether there's an issue around exhaustion. You don't know whether there's an issue around skill. But it shouldn't be like that. We should be able to use the roads in harmony with one another. And this is what we're wanting to achieve with Safer Stops. I think I've gone too many slides. Let me just go up again. It's a bit slow. There we go. So the first thing we set about once we had created the NPC, which is now being converted to an NPO, was to find the steering committee. And I looked to the members of the CTA, partners in the CTA, who had already worked with me, built a relationship with me, and there's a level of trust and understanding that what we achieved with our massive program around the development of women, they would trust that I would have the same competency to be able to initiate this in this association. So obviously USAID came on board straight away. The Commercial Transport Academy, which is my company, the very next partner that said, hell yes, we're on board, is Hollard. Hollard recognized that if they got behind the Safer Stops Association, they would be able to offer their members, or their clients, I should say, a discounted rate if they stopped at a Safer Stops affiliated truck stop. So I just want to mention this, guys. We're not building new truck stops. We're looking at the existing current infrastructure, and we are setting a benchmark of 3 categories, from a basic minimum that you can say you can use the Safer Stops logo on, to a high quality bells and whistles truck stop that has a gym, has a Zen garden like the PE one has a gaming room with all the snooker tables and everything else. That's the top end. It has the trucker wellness guys, which is supported through the National Bargaining Council. Those would be the top end truck stops. So we're wanting to categorize them. We're wanting to categorize these truck stops on what appears to be on a national footprint, on a national highway, the N1, the N3, the N2, versus what's sitting in suburban areas, because the drivers driving truck and trailers, or even our rigids, need to still stop at a truck stop facility in the suburban area. So we're having to grade these truck stops based on their location and their audience. The very next organization, and Ray sitting here today, was Crystal by C-Track. I mean, it was a no-brainer for them as well. And when they looked at how they would bring support for, which you will see some of our goals in the association, Ray was the catalyst for bringing in other stakeholders, like the accident specialist, who has an incredible, not the accident specialist, Rescue One, who has an incredible app where there's about 5,000 feet on the ground, that within 10 minutes of a panic call, you can have someone to you in the suburban areas in about a half an hour on our national roads. Wouldn't that be an incredible value add for our drivers? If they break down, if they suspect that they are about to be hijacked, that they can press the panic button and have people there to support them. But more than that, Rescue One will also support their family. So while they're driving, if their family hit difficulties, they can use the app. And the same guys that would support them would go out to their families, giving the drivers some peace of mind that their families are being looked after. I think it's just the most incredible app that we are going to be bringing in. We immediately looked at Engine. At my last speaking event with the RFA in May, Engine hounded me to come on as the first oil company And we decided that the pilot project would be with Engine, and then we would open it up to the truck stops. So using a lot of the data that Engine had already collected on the state of their truck stops, we would then use that as a platform to be able to measure and benchmark national truck stops. Good, who has but from each of these companies there's a representative. They also in the development of health. They've converted trucks into buses, and the buses have 3 compartments that do everything from a full physical, way and beyond occupational health and safety medical, to the MRE checks, and they do optometry, meaning that your drivers can be in Beaufort West having their eyes checked. The optometrist sits in Johannesburg, sees that they need prescription glasses, spectacles, writes the prescription, and the guys working on the bus issue the drivers with their spectacles. The whole check, all of it, which feeds into your PDRP renewal, would cost you 1,200 Rand, and you would know the exact health status of your drivers. In fact, the medical actually will give the drivers a prescription as well for them to go and get whatever they need, or refer them to a doctor or a specialist. So these are some of the partners we are looking at, but that doesn't undermine the value that we've already created with the National Bargaining Council as well. Michelin Tires, CVLC, we needed someone who knew the industry, and Catherine Larkin for me was a no-brainer. She had to be part of this. She had to be part of the connection, because she's just the most amazing conduit. When we started looking at how we would bring about the auditing environment, we looked at Craig Proctor-Parker from the accident specialist. I mean, he is one of South Africa's most renowned root cause analysis specialists in accidents. And then we also wanted to bring in Zolabix, which is my auditing company, to be able to put together a framework that we could do, possibly look at safer stops becoming a quality symbol through the SABS. So if you have the Safer Stops logo on your truck stop, it means you meet a criteria, and you then have to be audited. We then brought in a legal lady from Avico, which we're very proud to have on board, and then obviously there are still a couple more, but I'm not going to hop on the slide any further. You can't see this, guys, but I wish you could. Our logo is a heart with a male and female, masculine and feminine arms crossing over one another like that. And the point of this is that we are looking for men and women to come together as a community within this industry, and to do what is necessary for the good of the entire transport community. This is not about one brand. This is not about an entity that needs to be developed. This is about really looking at road safety, and what underpins road safety. So coming to the end of this, because I don't, how much more time do I have, guys? 10 minutes, 5 minutes? 5 minutes. There are 4 pillars, and we're just adding on a 5th one now. But there's 4 primary pillars that we will be looking at with the truck stops. First of all is driver health and wellness. How do the truck stops, which are our drivers' second homes, think about that. They spend more time at a truck stop than what they do at their own homes. How do the truck stops fulfill their physical and emotional needs? They don't, is the answer. And we are going to address that. The truck stops that I looked at, guys, on the N1, a lounge facility was a bar stool against a countertop. The parking areas were either swamped with water when it was raining, or they were in a dust storm when the wind blew. The eating facilities, when I see somebody, and by the way, guys, really great fat cook over there, but when I see a meal that says fat cook and polony, have you got any idea how much nutrition is in that? And that's a meal for a driver, fat cook and polony? We had to address that. We felt that it was our responsibility to be able to address the driver's physical, nutritional health and wellness. Many of our truck drivers are struggling with depression. It's undiagnosed. They don't want to talk about it. They need to. We need to find a way that our drivers can collect all of their chronic medication at a truck stop, so that they don't go without their medication and go into withdrawal symptoms. and we're wanting to work with a couple of partners on that. We're wanting the drivers to have access to gyms. Do you know how many issues the drivers have, even though they've got vehicles that are ergonomically designed with hydraulics in the seats? They have such issues with their lower backs, their hips, their spine. Some of them have even got their spinal discs have compacted on one another. They have no way to stretch out and to exercise their bodies. They need to do that. They need a gym, and they need to be able to work out when they get off their vehicles at night. We want the truck stops to meet a minimum standard, guys, so that you as operators know that if it bears a Safer Stops logo, you can trust that your vehicles, your fleet will be safe there. You can then start to talk to your underwriters to get a discount, because this is where the insurance companies are most at risk when these vehicles stop, that are from theft or damage. We want to be able to give you the opportunity to find safe stops for your drivers to stop at. We want to continue developing the drivers, so we want to get driver training out of the classroom and into the cab. When our drivers stop at night, we want them to be able to work on an app and go through an occupation, one of the TITA, CETA accredited occupations, that we can start to help them build that upward mobility plan, that future plan of where they're going to end up by doing their training in the cab. But probably the most important two what Gavin was talking about today was public awareness and app, which is the brand new one, the app and data-driven interface. We have to work with the public. They need to understand the value our truck drivers bring to our economy. Without them, without trucks, the economy stops. It is what it is. Without drivers, the trucks stop. But it's not just drivers, guys, it's healthy drivers. We need drivers that are well rested, and whether it's 4 hours, I met drivers when I was interviewing them that work for 28 days on. 28 days, can you imagine? Some of us feel exhausted after 3 days business trips. 28 days, their bodies are vibrating, their ears are vibrating continually. They lose their hearing. We have a role and responsibility as stakeholders in this industry to restore human dignity to the drivers and start to look at what they need. We also need to work with the public to make them aware of how much our drivers sacrifice in terms of their family, because the average driver actually raises their family on WhatsApp. So how do we help them get closer to their families? And then how do we start to collect the data that can then inform you, the stakeholders, of how we are going to change the way we do things? So guys, we're at stand 160. Please come down and have a look. Come chat to us, come scan our QR code, get connected to us on WhatsApp, on LinkedIn, connect to us, Safer Stops website. At the moment, it's free to become an associate member. You just have to sign up. Next year, we will start discussing membership when the fees dry up or the money dries up from USAID. We'll have a plan for that. But get on board now and help us shape this association. Those 5 pillars that I mentioned, there is a place for every organization to play a role. So each steerco or 2 steerco members will be allocated to one of those pillars. And then we want the industry to form working groups within their organizations to participate under those pillars. So if health and safety is something you're involved with, please get involved in the health and safety element. If it's driver training and development, get involved in that. But there is a way that all of you can participate in creating brand awareness. And we're very proud to end off by saying that we've managed to, this association, although it's just started, but it really does come from the fact that I have built up 28 years of industry knowledge. I've been working in this industry since I was 21, and don't do the maths. But it does give you an idea that those relationships, those incredible relationships that have been developed over those years, is what's made this association possible in such a short time. And we have the support of almost every association, from SAPA to SAF, RFA, I'm trying to think of some of the others. It doesn't really matter. You can have a look on the slide. It's also been sent out. So everyone that's online, guys, I know I'm a nightmare to reach. WhatsApp me. I seldom answer my phone. Anyone that works with me will tell you how a challenge it is. Yes, it is. Running a project of this size, 2 companies in association, is a task. But meet me, come chat to me, come chat to Alan, and let's see how we can get you on board. And once again, the next time you drive past a driver, please just acknowledge, thank them, recognize them, because they are the backbone of our economy. Thank you for your time, guys.
Thank you, Nikki. Next, we are going to welcome Zola Lolo. She's going to speak about efficient end-to-end management of trucking operation from onloading to offloading.
Good day, everyone. My name is Zola Lolo, and I'm the sales manager for a company called Triplo. So I'll just give you a brief background about what Triplo does and how I am actually speaking to you today and how we have relevance for Triplo to be here today speaking to you and making very worthy partnerships and communications about how our business works and how it can integrate with so many other businesses that are exhibiting today. So basically, my topic today is the transport management system, which is for the efficient end-to-end management of trucking operations from loading to offloading. So a brief background, Triplo was founded in 2019. And an interesting fact is that our founder and CEO, Mr. Victor Chaiteji, started this company because he was originally into trucking. So in terms of how he was managing his trucks, he had about 10 trucks in his business, and he noticed that there is so much WhatsApp, there was so much Excel spreadsheets, and every time you needed to know where cargo was in real time, it was next to impossible. So in order to move away from all the Excel spreadsheets, to move away from WhatsApp and SMSs and phone calls, he decided to devise this software solution, which is a software for logistics operations. So the end-to-end bit of it is there is zero manual intervention. There is zero WhatsApp, there is zero phone calls. It's one-stop shop where you get all your information about your cargo in real time. So how is this beneficial to you? If you're a cargo owner, if you're a transporter, we all know the most important thing is the cargo that you're carrying. That is the biggest value that you're moving from point A to B, and it's important for you to know, where is this cargo in real time? Is it still safe? Is it in the hands of someone that you entrusted it to? And will it get to your end consumer or your customer still in the right position? So this is what I'm going to be taking you through about software from Triplo and how it manages the efficient movement of your cargo from point A to B. So basically, I've already told you who I am and why I'm here representing Triplo. So I'll take you through to what is a transport management system, which we call a TMS. I think it's something that is, most people here have heard this term a lot. So a TMS, it provides visibility into day-to-day transportation operations, trade compliance, information and documentation, and ensuring timely delivery of your freight and goods. So transport management systems also streamline the shipping process, and they make it easier for your business to manage, to optimize, and to make sure the transport operations are flowing smoothly. Also, a transport management system is a logistics platform that uses technology to help businesses to plan, to optimize the physical movement of goods, both incoming and outgoing, and to make sure that the shipment is compliant and there's proper documentation is available. And we all know that in terms of transportation, it's not only the cargo that's important. What's important is to make sure that there is also an audit trail in terms of who picked up the stock. When the stock was delivered in the right condition, proof of deliveries were uploaded, invoices were uploaded. So on the same system that I'm talking about today, the Triplo TMS, we have that visibility with PODs being loaded onto the same system from our digital app. So a driver is able to actually say, I've picked up the stock. This is the picture of the invoice. I have it, they upload it. As soon as they actually deliver to the end user, they get the POD that can be automatically uploaded in PDF format. Okay? So how does the transport management system work? So from moving from input to raw materials, straight into processing, the assembly and manufacturing, straight into storage and warehousing, and then retail and distribution to the end customer. So what we do in our system is to provide capacity for loads planning. First of all, on the loads management system, when you have your different transporters, especially for people and companies that have subcontractors, or they don't do their own deliveries of their goods using their own trucks, we have this platform to say, when we put you through onto the platform using the software which we call a white labeled cloud. So for example, if your company was called Triplo, like us, your cloud would be branded as Triplo. So if you are wanting to invite your transporters and all your users that are going to be working in that one system, which is the TMS, there is someone who is called a super user. The super user gets trained and uploaded onto that system, and that's the only person that can invite all the other users onto the platform. So that also gives you safety to know that your company information is very much taken care of, and the only people that have access to this cloud and to this TMS that is branded your company are the people that you have invited, and they can only get information that is relevant to them. So from that, we go through to preloading and loading. So all the due diligence that goes into the trip planning until the trip gets, the loads get loaded onto the truck. And as soon as this loading has taken place, the track and trace starts. So this is one of the most important parts of the journey of the road freight, because people would like to know, when did the driver arrive at the loading bay? Did he leave on time? Because a lot of companies get charged demurrage costs because someone loaded the truck and they went and parked at a place where they are working on maintenance of the vehicle. They stopped for fuel. They stopped to eat somewhere, but that is on someone else's time. So with the visibility of the TMS, you get to know exactly what time this was loaded, what time it left the loading bay and made it onto the road from the track and trace. So we also have the digital platform I mentioned, the mobile platform I mentioned, to say when a driver has a problem along the trip, especially with cross-border, they're able to also communicate in-app to say, I have got a breakdown, I need to fuel, or I've got a challenge with my license discs, I have a problem here and there, so that whoever is actually looking at the same system at the same time knows that the goods are going to be late by this much time because the driver had to stop for a breakdown or to fuel. So how is that for visibility and traceability? So that gives you the peace of mind from the click of a button at your desk, wherever you are, be it on holiday, be it in your office, be it traveling. You are just able to go onto the TMS to click a button and understand where exactly your cargo is, complete with comments and notes, and you as the cargo owner are also able to put your own notes to the driver to say, approved, you can go ahead and do this, or you can go ahead and draw fuel from this certain place, to make sure that the end-to-end process is visible and is well managed. And at the end of the trip, like I mentioned at the beginning, you're able to upload your proof of delivery. So most companies struggle with the fact that once the trip is completed, what is the sign that the trip has completed? And that is the upload of a proof of delivery. So as soon as the company gets the proof of delivery, now they know that this is legible for payment. So that's another way we help. The reverse billing that can be done on the same system, which is the Triplo software, gives everyone end-to-end visibility. And then moving on, what brings us to why should we get a TMS? Why software? Why can't we stick to SMSs? Why can't we stick to WhatsApp? Why can't we stick to calling after drivers? Why can't we stick to sitting back and waiting until the load is delivered and not really worry where the load is? So the problem to cargo owners: inefficient management of the road freight movement on their cargo, manual interactions with their third-party transporters and transport providers, and then also extreme difficulties in managing multiple transport providers. Imagine if you've got subcontractors of up to 50 transporters. How many people do you have to employ to make sure they give a call to 50 drivers at an interval of every hour to find out where they are, what they're doing, and what's the state of the cargo they're carrying? It's time consuming. It's something that is not manageable. You might have to actually hire 20 people who give calls to 50 drivers. So the cost-cutting element also comes into it. Also, the lack of visibility and lack of transparency on cargo in transit, and the manual and physical paperwork, which is cumbersome from processing of the movement of goods, and also limited to no automated data collection. So the same system of the Triplo management system gives you full data in terms of MIS reports. So instead of looking through for your Excel sheets and trying to find where the information of who picked up the cargo, where they are, and how the POD got eventually uploaded, we have information that you can pull straight from the TMS, which is full of data, and that data can actually be put in a way that you would like your company to receive it. So be it a decision maker in terms of management, they don't have to wait for this type of data. They click and find out what they're supposed to be sharing in management meetings. Transport planners, they don't have to make numerous calls before they get into meetings to give an update of how all the loads are going. Everyone gets to get information on the one system at the click of a button. Then, the troubles and the challenges of transporters. One, a battle in accessing profitable and return loads. We know the biggest trouble for transporters is basically to get work. You might have a truck, but one instance, do you have the right working capital to start a trip? Do you have the right information in terms of your own compliance of all your trucks or your drivers or your insurance? Is everything in order that you can get a big client today and start the trip tomorrow? Which brings us to another thing that we offer as one of our solutions at Triplo, which is trip financing. So fintech solution, this is whereby we also offer to our customers, which are normally the cargo owners, the advantage of early settlement of invoices and the advantage of diesel upfront. So 50% of the trip, mostly for a transporter, the diesel aspect comes into it. So we at Triplo, through our system, we say, if you are signed up with us and your cargo owner is signed up with us, we can give your transporter diesel upfront at pump price or slightly less than pump price to begin the trips immediately. So that's something that we also offer still as Triplo. Also, some transporters struggle to fulfill the corporate customer trips due to not having more cash flow. So we offer cash flow, and we can pay your transporters in advance without having for them to wait for up to 30 to 45 days for invoices to be cleared. So as soon as a clean POD is uploaded on that same Triplo TMS, we are able to actually pay upfront. Then we get our payment at the end of the month from the cargo owner. So this frees up cash flow and frees up the flexibility for the transporters to run more trips for cargo owners. Also, the use of multiple systems in their cargo customers. The fact that the Triplo TMS is one stop, it makes sure that no one has to deviate to any other documents to make sure they understand how the road freight journey is looking. Everyone has a click of a button and they see what everything is looking like. Also, running their business manually without systems. So these are some of the challenges that necessitated us to come up with this software to help not only cargo owners, but also transporters, and also in terms of the software, in terms of logistics, and in terms of fintech. So before I move on, I will also mention that our three main solutions at Triplo is number one, software as a system, which is what we're talking about right now, which is the Triplo management system. That's the software. Our second leg is the logistics as a service. So with logistics, we have transporters on our platform who are ready and pre-vetted and waiting to start trips for our customers. So for example, someone might say, I need to complete my nationwide trips through the week and I'm short by 10 trucks. You are able to work with us at Triplo using the pre-vetted transporters on our system to say, we can give you 10 trucks from a reputable transporter who is already pre-vetted and ready to start your trips. And we go a step further to say that same transporter on our platform, we can give them diesel in advance so they're able to start your trips immediately. No working capital needed from the side of the cargo owner. We bear that risk and we start those trips immediately. The software solution, as I mentioned, contract management is something that we do off the software, route optimization in terms of planning. So we have in the Triplo system what's called the rates engine. So one thing that is also difficult during submission of loads and acceptance of loads in that system is the constant changing of the rates because of the changes in price for fuel. So as soon as that happens on the 7th of the beginning of the month, there is a manual upload of the new rates on the Triplo management system so that when a loads planner is looking for a transporter on the system, you can actually get a recommendation from the same system to say, with the route that you're planning to go at and the truck that you need and the licensing that you need, this is the transporter that you should choose based on the best rate. So it aggregates the different rates by the different transporters on your platform, and it saves you time for not searching for numerous trucks. It already gives you the recommended transporter to go with based on the best rate. So also the vetting and compliance and the paperwork management goes through the same system. So a lot of people who have the different drivers, some drivers are on their IDs, some drivers are on their passports. So all those compliance documents are also on the same system, which allows you to flag to say this vehicle license disc is actually about to expire, so that you will not be issuing that vehicle to any load until you sort out the licensing. Same applies to the passports of the drivers on that same system. Some passports are going to expire, so it also flags those when you're choosing a load that you're going to submit to a different transporter to say, no, don't choose this guy. His passport is about to expire. No, don't choose this truck or this rate because they don't have the best rate. So the aggregating helps you make best decisions for pre-planning given all the information that is uploaded on that one system. Also, the service of the market, and full with data analytics and the automated paperwork that I mentioned. So far, we have up to 6,000 vehicles that go through our same system. These are the vetted transporters I mentioned. So if someone wants to come through and say, Triplo, I do have trips, but I have a shortage of trucks, we have up to 6,000 vehicles that go through our platform every month. And then 8,000 additional trailers and up to 5,700 drivers. The Triplo TMS has delivered significant value to our customers in various business verticals, and that's FMCG, that's mining and automotive, as well as the public sector space across various geographies. To mention a few, we are trading and working in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, and in Zambia currently. So the Triplo software offers an innovative, centralized, and efficient fleet management solution to our clients. Our clients leverage multiple modules available on the Triplo TMS to improve fleet management, to optimize compliance, and this has resulted in manual processes now being automated. Not only does it save you time for your business, but it makes you money ultimately for your business. So some of the clients that we have actually been supplying with our Triplo TMS, Airbnb, Access World, Toyota Tusho Africa. We are working with PepsiCo, the Rhodes Food Group, Greenrod, just to mention a few. So these that I'm mentioning that are currently Triplo clients, they are using our platform for different reasons, from the software itself as a solution, to the logistics as a solution, and to also the fintech aspect I mentioned, which is early settlement of invoices and diesel upfront for transporters. So for you guys to get more information, I see my colleague has already been handing out these flyers. The full information about Triplo and how our software works. We also are available at stand number 9. So if you would like to come through and book a demo with us, so a demo is free of charge. We can actually take you through the actual Triplo TMS, showing you how a load is submitted on the platform, how transporters get to accept those loads on the platform, and how the track and trace using the world map is done. So if you are interested in knowing more about Triplo and the solutions we offer, please feel free, come through to stand number 9, and don't be shy. We can give you a demo any day and would love to work with you. Thank you so much for your time.
Harry just informed me that we are streaming out to 5 other platforms. So we just want to welcome all of the people that's watching in over the our seminars. We are going to introduce Eugene Herbert from MasterDrive, and he's going to be addressing behavioral changes in drivers within the different generations. Thank you.
Thank you for making the time available. Just if I can give some context to this, some of our speakers. Some of our speakers before, Gavin Kelly from the Road Freight Association, Nikki Scott from Safer Stops. It's something that we have all in common is the issue of road safety. The area that we're specifically involved in is, of course, driver training. Nikki alluded to that. But one of the things that I would like to share with you, because I don't believe that anybody doesn't agree that driver training is needed, but in some instances they may feel that what they're getting or it's not affecting the change that they would like to have. Just listening to Nikki earlier talk about a truck where even though the vehicle has got active suspension on the seats, that the drivers still suffer from backache. I was on a recce trip in Hyderabad in India, and for those of you who know how they sell trucks there, they sell it with a chassis cowl. It's really just the front of the truck, the windscreen, etc., and then the organizations build their own body around it. That's not the load body, it's the whole body that the driver sits in. And I went to look along to have a look at couple of the vehicles in the fleet there, and I wish you could have seen the office. It was about the size of this platform, about 50 people. And I looked in there and I saw that the seat was one of these plastic chairs, you know, that comes on a metal frame, and it is bolted directly to the cab, the chassis. Afterwards I said to the owner, tell me, do you not think that's a bit of a problem? Doesn't it create driver fatigue? You know what his response is to me? No. The drivers like it because it shakes and it keeps them awake on the road. I don't know what it does to their fatigue, but that's the kind of situation that we see in other parts of the world. But as far as to you and I is concerned, we're an organization that focuses on trying to improve and build up skills in an area that is so lacking. But if you have a look at the first point there, why behavior is hard to change. And there's some really nice technical terms there that we talk about: neuroplasticity, the trans-theoretical model, and then the generational acceptance. And when we start looking at the work that we do, we realize that certainly whilst in a motoring context we can talk about the things that are important. If you look at some of the facts over there, 15,000 people, and depending on whether you speak to the Medical Research Council, it could be as high as 25,000 people die on our roads every year. Now, if you just take the conservative number, about 15,000, that is equivalent to a jumbo jet crashing every 10 days. And what's sad to see is that if an event such as that occurred, everybody would be mobilized. There would be actions and activities put in place to ensure that it never happens again. Thorough investigations. And yet year on year, notwithstanding the UN's commitment to halve fatalities by 2030 by 50%, we still see the numbers on our roads today. And then, of course, if you have a look at the other factors that we see over there, 60% of crashes are possibly as a result of fatigue. Half of the drivers on our roads have obtained their driver's license in a fraudulent manner. They've got a license, and it looks all legal, but it really hasn't been obtained. And that's where some of the issues start coming in. Is a person who's got a license, do they have the right to drive on our roads, or do they have the responsibility? And that's a moral question that we have to have a look at. But let's just talk to the vehicles that we use. On the left-hand side, you'll see the screen over there. ICE vehicles are certainly inefficient. And that's compared with electric vehicles. Just by the way, my insurer today, or this week, said to me, no, that I've got to take a hybrid vehicle off the fleet because it's no longer insurable. No, but where are we going? And when we speak about behavioral change, there's a mindset that we've got to look at. And just have a look at engine efficiency over there. If you've driven any electric vehicle, notably a truck or a bus, you'll notice how efficient that vehicle is. 80% of the energy is used. It's not lost, whereas in an ICE vehicle, which is an internal combustion engine, that energy is lost. So if we accept that training is an important component, do all the advanced driver training courses that are on offer, do they make a driver safer? And if you have a look on, I'll mention it to you over there, there's 3 things that are important. That's the ability, and I'll show you a picture of a person's brain just now where that gets functional and where it works. But more than ability or the skills that's needed, there's got to be a motivation and the willingness to comply with that motivation. And we see it every day in the work that we do. So international best practice, and we spend a lot of time researching that, tells us that it's not only skills that we have to impart to a driver. We have to impart the motivation for them to apply the skills that would ultimately change their behavior. And the model that we use is called a BAMS model, behavior, attitude, awareness, motivation, and skill. And when we started looking at this more closely, and if you have a look at the area, if you can see the slide over there, the role of neuroplasticity in behavior change. Our brains are undergoing change all the time. And when you start looking at what that change can encompass and what it should look at, it works around the neurons in the brain. And the picture at the top there, you will notice new synapses, and one of the slides I'll show you in a moment. This is taking place all the time. And yet many organizations and companies fail to accept the fact that those things, for them to be used and work efficiently, has got to be done on the basis to change and behavior and motivate that change. And you'll notice that comes about as a result of learning and experiences. Nikki made mention earlier to in the cab training, and in principle that is absolutely correct. But you can do any amount of training in the cab, and if the person has no desire or does not see the need for it, the ability to retain that information is severely compromised. Now, having a look at this part that I'd like you to focus on, and there's a slide on the top right-hand corner there. It speaks about if you don't practice, your brain will get rid of unused connections. And those connections that we're talking about, the picture on the left-hand side, it shows in the second diagram the neurons. And that picture there shows a picture of a working brain where the neurons are communicating with one another, whether it be an electrical impulse or a chemical action that's taking place. And the reason why that's important, the brain, as you see pictured over there, the cerebellum, rotated right at the back over there, is typically involved in being able to see things like that. One of the factors that many people are happy with is that which takes place in their occipital lobe, and that is where the mechanical actions of driving are easy to follow. You learn how to use the clutch, don't you? You learn how to use the indicator, you learn how to steer, and if it's a self-steering steering wheel, you know that if you let it go, this will happen. Now that's happening all the time. That's the easiest component to change. And in fact, when they do driver assessments, that is where their focus is. But the area that we really should be looking at is called the frontal lobe. And that is where executive decisions are made. The type of executive decision in its simplest form that I can give you, if a driver were driving down the road and they saw a ball bouncing down the road, what would they conclude? The inexperienced driver may conclude that, if you remember the Hyundai ad a few years ago, is to try and hit the ball with the car. But the experienced driver, as a result of the neurons that have been formed in the brain over a period of time, tells us or tells him that there may be a person, in this instance a young child, that's coming through or following through on that ball. And therefore it would make the executive decision either to stop, change direction, or do something that would change the outcome of probably hitting that child. And as we look at this one over here, now we're trying to examine how the brain works. Picture on the left-hand side over there, you'll see two neurons. And the information that's been communicated through the neurons is done through the synapses. And there's a picture that's showing you what is happening. And the simplest way of describing to you how a new neural network is formed. And when we do driver training, this is what we want to do. We want to discard the old things and embrace the new things. And if you look at catching a ball, for example, the first time a youngster catches the ball, if it's a baseball, it could be fairly easy because they've got a mitt. But as time goes by and they become more proficient because they're doing it all the time, they're practicing with dad, they can catch the ball that much easier. And that is an example of how new neural networks are formed in the brain. The hand-eye coordination tells him to where to place his hand so that he can collect the ball and do so quickly. Now those synapses that I mentioned over there, there's information that's been fed chemically as well as electrically. And that picture in the circle shows, and there's a technical term for those little blocks over it, it's a sheathing myelin. In a healthy connection, it's flowing very, very quickly. And if you can follow the movement of the electrical impulse over there, you see it doesn't reach the other neuron. And this typically occurs with age. So when we spoke at the outset, or the theme of which was to look at generational changes, we have to accept that the way we trained 10, 15 years ago is not necessarily the best today. It may work in certain instances, and you've gone through death by PowerPoint, where all that the instructor does, and he reads off this, and then they answer the question. And that typically is some of the accredited training that you have, that they've just got to prove that they went through the material. So in the bottom there, you've got a picture of a teenage brain. Now consider what that means to you and I. There's a stage, and you may have had this with your children, where they know everything. They are of the opinion that you don't know anything. They're rebellious. They've got a desire to learn. They're not very filtered when it comes to learning. And that's what's happening over there. So in order to get a change, there's three things that must happen. There must be a chemical change, where the manner in which this new information is being fed through to the parts of the brain. It's got to be structured, and then it's got to be functional. And that really means that those things that they've been speaking about and we're talking about become habit. All of you will know the term driving on autopilot. You will go from place A to place B, and somebody says to you, I saw you and I waved at you and you didn't wave back. You knew the route, you went through traffic lights, stopped streets, etc. You passed cars, etc. But at the end of the day, you can't remember. Now that's good in a way, because it enables us to get from point A to point B without overthinking it. But you can imagine what could happen if, as a result of you being operating on autopilot, something untoward had occurred. Now, there's good habits and there's bad habits. And I challenge you to believe that the most habits that many people have based on the schema that they've learned are bad habits. So how does this impact then on it's called synaptic tuning. So those brain cells that we spoke about, those neurons, the fact is, if you are not using something, such as old clothes, you would discard them, not so. I don't know anybody here who would be such a hoarder that they want to keep everything that they've ever had. So the brain operates in a similar way. The synapses that is communicating that information, if they're not being used, and let's talk about bad things, not wearing your seatbelt, bad following distance, etc., those eventually will be replaced with good cells that forms the mindset that says, I do the following. And then, of course, it says to you, such as, and you use your mobile device, you take off all the old apps that you've had there for a period of time. Does it not work more efficiently? And that's the concept of synaptic tuning. By feeding our brain with the good stuff, we get rid of the bad stuff and we make it more efficient, particularly when it comes to training. And the model that we work on is the following. And there's 6 steps that are involved. You know, it talks about a pre-contemplation. Now, I say to you, and you've never been exposed to driver training, and all you've got is your license. You've never had an accident, and nobody's told you the fact that you can drive better than what you do. There is no need that's recognized by you to change any of your behavior. The status quo is happy, and we find this particularly when we talk to organizations, and these are the less than caring ones. No, they've got a license. What more do they need? Given the fact that I've shared with you 50% have been obtained in a fraudulent manner, having a license is not good enough. So if I can create an awareness of you, and now we start talking about the contemplation, you start looking at the accidents, fatalities, and you say, hey, hold on, this is not good enough. I recognize there's a need to change, which would then help you in the following step, in the yellow one there, to put in place things that would enable that change. And yeah, we're talking about policies, maybe directives, news communication, etc. What that in effect starts is an action, and you enroll your drivers and you say, this is what you're going to do. All of which is good, but remember, and that's where we come to later on, they're there because you've told them to be there. They don't necessarily recognize the need for the change as yet. Now, at that point in time, you'll notice there's a veer off to the left over there. You could decide, nah, this is not for me. It's too much trouble. Besides which, the guys don't want to listen. They don't want to abide by that. And in which case, you've lost the war. Or alternatively, if you proceed beyond that, it talks about termination. This is where it starts becoming habit. It's led by the chief executive of the company to ensure that there's a standard that's maintained and adhered to, such as he will always wear his seatbelt. He would not use his cell phone. And please, and here's a warning that we give to everyone at this point in time, we get concerned about the end of the year parties. There's alcohol that's consumed. And yet how many people get behind the wheel after they've had a drink? And let's not debate whether they're over the limit or not. A person who's been drinking should never be driving. And I repeat that, should never be driving. So let's just have a look for a brief moment how the context of that would work in a training component. And that's the stages which one goes through in looking at training. Now, you'll appreciate there's a behavioral change that needs to be introduced to the driver. But you and I, if we're head of L&D, should be looking at how we can do that more effectively so as to change or achieve the results that we want. And this, the next slide is going to help you understand what it is. There's a behavioral model, and I mentioned to you earlier what we need to look at. Behavior, there's a motivation, there's ability, and I'll introduce a new point to you which is called a trigger. Looking at the next slide, that's called BMAT principle. Behavior is modified by being motivated, by having the ability to do so, and then the tool or the means that would make a person want to do that. And nothing better describes it than the following slide. If you have a look at that, you've got an axis. Left-hand side, you've got motivation, and it's from very motivated to down in the bottom to boring. And the bottom axis over there speaks about ability, from something simple to difficult and complex. One of the challenges that most organizations have is to get a person to refrain from using their cell phone while driving. Now, truth be told, that as we came out of COVID, the instances of distracted while driving increased significantly. And the primary reason was that people grew to be dependent on their communication device to do everything, whether it was meetings, to communicate, call, place orders with Uber Eats or something like that. So it became an extension of themselves. And this then carried on onto the road use, where they were able to use vehicles again. Now, if I have a look at the cell phone as a tool, now let's assume, and let's just move on to the next slide, and I'll share it with you over there. The motivation for not wanting to use a cell phone could be driven by fear or reward. I will pay you X amount if you don't use your cell phone, and that could be the case with a youngster. Or in the case of an older person, the fear of having a crash. And you've seen some of the horrific videos of people who've been using their cell phone and they're involved in a crash, the consequences of which are enormous. And in the South African context, one person being dependent or 10 on one the seriousness of that is exacerbated. So let's accept that there's high motivation because you don't want to die on the road. But does that mean that it's easy to implement? Using the following example, or expanding on that, down the bottom axis that speaks about simple to difficult. I tell you, you take your cell phone when you get into your car, or before you get into your car, you switch it off, you go to the boot, and you lock it in your boot, and then you get into your car and you go. Now that starts getting a little bit difficult, doesn't it? If, however, I gave you an app that as soon as you got into the car, your phone would be immobilized. Do you appreciate it? I've made it simple, accompanied with a motivation. It's relatively easy, looking at the back, the slide further back, for us to be in the space where the motivation to change is there, and the actions that you participate or partake in will ensure that you do so. So, in an ideal world, this is where we should be, bottom right-hand corner, black path. Because what we find happening as we walk through the dot, the span, and the path, there's levels of engagement where you want to change, but you just don't. And then you get to a point where you do change, but it's only temporarily. We would like to be at the point where your behavior is such that the change is constant and it becomes part of new habits, new neurons that have been forming in the brain. And here's an example. If we look at those 4 components there, let's assume that the behavior that we want to change is your driving behavior. You could look at one of 2 things, and on the right side there, Sunday driver. If you only take out your classic on a Sunday and you never engage with other traffic, do you think the motivation to drive better is really there? Because you're just having a fun, slow ride on a Sunday afternoon. If you decided that we had to engage with you differently because you travel on the highways, then we have to introduce, bottom left-hand side, new skills that would teach you. And by the way, when you do K53, they never take a person out on the road in heavy traffic or at night. So now if you want to grow better or grow your skills, we need to introduce those to you. And then there's going to be what would motivate you to do it. And if it is listening to the radio when you go for a drive, you find that particularly motivating, then the ability is that much easier. But it's really divided into 3 sections, the motivation. And that motivation talks to the fact that there must be a sensation. It's either a good sensation or a bad sensation, as we determine the fear of death or the positivity of a reward. In point number 2, anticipation. The brain likes to work with things that reward it, endorphins. So if there's going to be a feel-good factor about making a change, then the likelihood of change is that much greater. And then, of course, the third area is that of belonging. We are social people by nature. We want to do what the crowd does, and which you see in various parts of the world, it has negative consequences. But let's accept that to be recognized for doing something good is a powerful motivator for you and I to make changes. Your wife may feel different. She may want you to be behind the wheel of the car that goes over the cliff. So don't encourage her too strongly, all right? 6 areas in terms of ability, the factors that could contribute to your ability to make a change or embrace a change. The one is time, because the one thing that we don't have a lot of is time. So time is critical. We've got to fit it in somewhere. It's going to cost money. Nobody wants to part with money. There's a physical effort that's involved. There's a mental effort because you've got to think things through. The need to be socially acceptable. If the social deviance is strong, that you will be ostracized, then there's a greater likelihood that you will grow in the ability. And then the last one over there, if you were looking at routine, if you had to go and pick up something for your wife and you were going to go fill up your car with fuel, what's it, 25 rand a liter, and she asked you to pick up bread and milk at the convenience store. It's relatively easy, isn't it? As part of your routine, all you've got to do is one thing different. But if you've got to go out of your way for 10 Ks, it becomes now more difficult to do it. So let's just have a look at some of the things that are in addition to that. And the 4th area that you're looking at is the physical effort. None of us really like to do more work than's needed. Yes, you may like to go to gym and do the things that's needed in order to improve your physique. But physical effort to change something that is going to be habitual requires a lot of work on it. Social deviance, you don't want to go against the grain. unlike some of the youngsters today, the brain is formed in a manner that makes them want to do things different, to almost rebel. And then, of course, the new routine. So we've now covered those 3 areas, or those 6 areas over there. But what we haven't spoken about is what would cause one to want to do that, in that red area in that one diagram I showed you. And there's 3 facets to that. It's either a facilitator, a spark, or a signal. Just talking about the spark. If you're committed to going to do gym, and your alarm is next to you on the bed, and you can just reach over and switch it off, it's easy to go back to sleep, you'll agree. If, however, you place it across the other side of the room, and you now have to get up to do that, that demonstrates that when an individual has the ability but lacks motivation, they need to get out of bed. So there's that can be done. The newsletter. This is a person who's highly motivated but doesn't have the ability to do it. So regular communication on performing good things, doing good things, becomes the facilitator of those actual things. And then, of course, there's the signal, which we speak to about where we could just put a post-it pad. You know what you've got to do. You're highly motivated. You've got the ability. But sometimes your memory just forgets you. So remember to get up, set the alarm in order to go and do the things. So that's what you and I need to do, to recognize that training is built around a premise that's not just about an ability. We've got to factor in so many things. And this particular slide in the center there, you can have copies of it, will show you all the things that you and I as individuals in a corporation have to do. But at the outset, we spoke about the different generations. I don't know what generation you guys are, but let's just focus for a moment, Generation Y. Now, if we're against texting and driving, phoning and driving, notice what Generation Y sits at. That's their preferred method of communication. So if you're going to get them to break bad habits that we know have bad consequences, they've got to have the right motivation. The ability is relatively simple, but we've also got to trigger it. So those are the different generations, and this is, we notice when we look at the manner of training that is most efficient. Looking at your generation that sits, I think it's Generation Y and the millennials, they looked at things differently. So an older person born in the 60s would be quite happy to sit through a presentation where the speaker is talking and reading off a PowerPoint presentation, because they were taught to be obedient, compliant, and accepting. But as the generations have changed, we've noticed what's done differently to them. And so moving to this one, the next one, we see those generations epitomized there. And just talking about the ones that were born post-96, think about how digitally savvy they are. If you've got children at that stage who can do these things, you will notice that they know your cell phone better than what you do. And in fact, they can tap into resources that we don't know about that. So how does that impact on training? Because that individual knows the information, they're able to do research, and if you as an instructor are telling them something that is incorrect, they know the answer already. So in the role that you play as a facilitator, all you're going to do is reinforce that which they possibly know and support it with physical aspects so that they have the motivation to change. By the way, that particular generation, the second worst for abuse of cell phones or distracted while driving, and the millennial one is the worst. But they are part where they started seeing independence. We speak about the gig economy. They were quite happy not to work for one employer. You have drivers like that. They're happy to freelance. Now, if we're training that individual, we don't have the company behind us to say, well, if you don't do this, you won't have a particular job over an extended period. And if we accept that those generations have different ways of learning that could warn them about the consequences, but based on behavioral change, it's got to be something that can work for us. And just working through there what L&D, learning and development managers have to do, in the final paragraph over there, it speaks about identify primary learning styles and work towards a blended approach to cater for all ages. And that's what we found as an organization. We don't have one size that fits all. We were able to look at what the needs of an organization, why typically if we went to speak to someone about training, it would probably take us anything from 3 weeks to 4 weeks to implement a training program. Because we need to understand the people that you're working with. We need to understand what you've done by way of implementing policies, but more importantly, adhering to those. And is there a motivation for those individuals to make the change? Because if you're using it, as some do, as a punitive tool, because you've made a mistake, you have to go for training, the motivation is long gone. And we would like to believe that if we adopt a different approach in the way we engage with those learners, and let's talk about learners, accepting that the primary thing that we want to do is to change behavior and find what motivates them. You've heard of the expression, what's in it for me? And if we have that approach, both in your development within the company and when we engage with people, we trust that we will get a better success rate and achieve more than what we've done over the years simply by giving PowerPoint presentations. With that, thank you for sharing the moment with me, and to all those users, listeners out there, viewers, if you want a copy of the presentation, you're more than happy to have it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. We are going to have a listen to Jonathan Mapeke. He is the National Fleet Manager of SPF, and he will be talking about the human element of fleet management.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Jonathan Mpake. I'm the National Fleet Manager for SBV. I've got a fan club there. It's Rent a Crowd. Don't worry about it. So, and I'm such a privilege to talk to you this afternoon about the human element of fleet management. And what I want to do this afternoon is show why fleet management is so important and why it is needed in the South African economy. So just as an introduction, as I said, my name is Jonathan, and I grew up in the East Rand. I grew up in Vosloorus. I'm a husband, and I've got two daughters, Hannah and Shekinah. I've been working in transport for almost 2 decades for various companies, Value Logistics, Imperial, Unitrans, Allied Publishing, Take a Lot, Easy Access, and now with SBV. And this is a passion for me. This, what I do, is not just a vocation. It is something that is a passion. It is something that is a calling. And it is something that is needed in our economy today. Lots of times we say that, oh, woe is me, the economy is wrong, the politicians are wrong. But I want to tell you this afternoon, we have a responsibility to do what we can to keep this economy moving. So let's jump right into it. So a lot of people ask, what is fleet management? The big technical English of it is that fleet management defined as overall management of an organizational transport activities. It overlooks various aspects of logistics in organizations driver management, fuel management, safety management, vehicle purchasing and maintenance. In other words, like the other speaker said, it is end to end. It is something that is beneficial and it helps us in our safety. Fleet management is a science. And lots of times people think it's just not the fleet controller checking tick boxes. Fleet management is a science because what we do as fleet managers, we ensure that people get home safely. And that is our prerogative. So secondly, I want to talk to you this afternoon about the type of fleet manager that is needed in South Africa. Right now in South Africa, we have a high rate, and the other speakers have spoken about it. We have a very high rate of crashes. There are accidents. People are dying every day. In my industry, people come with bombs to my vehicles. I have no idea what they're looking for, but they're coming for bombs. They think they're going to be rich. They try to do that, but it is risky stuff and it needs to be understood as a science. I want to tell you a little bit of a story. Second day of my first day of work in the real work, I started off in 2004 with Value Logistics. And as I'm excited, I'm from the township, I'm from Vosloorus, I'm getting on the bus, I'm now traveling to go to Isando, or if you have big English, it's Isando. Us township people call it Isando. But now I'm on this bus. I'm headed to work. I'm excited. I get to the part where I'm supposed to get off. And as I'm getting there, 1 foot out, and as I tried walking out, the bus driver drove forward and I fell out of the bus. There am I, face first onto the ground, and now I'm thinking, all my bones are broken. This is very serious. How am I going to continue to work? But I said, you know what? My father gave me advice to be resilient. I dusted myself off. I went to work. I put on a cast the next day. I looked like I was in a car accident, but I went back to work. Now, no non-HR people here, so you did not hear the story. No? Don't repeat it. But because this is not a vocation, it is a passion. Fleet management has placed the role that we do what we do every day to make sure that people get home safe. You need to be dynamic. You need to be innovative. The technological advancements that have been spoken about. Eugene spoke about driver training and understanding the different types of drivers. You need to put that all together to make sure you get people home safe. The methodology that I believe in doing this is called people, process, and technology. Because you can have the best tracking system. You can have the best dash cam system. You can analyze your fuel. You can train your drivers. You can do everything. But if you do not bring this together, it does not make the impact that it needs to. And that is why I believe in this. It's bringing all of this together to make impact. Think about if all our trucks were safe and maintained, what impact us as an industry can do to driver safety, to people safety on the road. It will be absolutely phenomenal. So we have to do a couple of things to do that. As leaders in the industry, one of the things we're going to have to do is be accountable and know that what we do is supposed to give other people value. Personally, what I believe in is working myself out of a job. Is that I want to impart to the next generation. Is that I want to see another Jonathan Parker win the Fleet Safety Awards. I won the first one. I'm not interested in what happens afterwards. I won the first Fleet Safety Awards, voted the best fleet manager. But now, what do I do next? I have to work myself out of a job. I have to create and impart the next fleet manager. There is a vacuum of leadership in our country. Do you agree? It is missing. It is absent on duty. It should be fired. We'll see next year what happens. It's absent. But we cannot sit back and say, you know what, and cry out. We need to create more leaders. We need to create future leaders to take our place, to expand the leadership. And that can happen also in road freight. We need more leaders. So the challenge I have for you, how many here are managers? Let me see by show of hands. Managers, your CEOs, your bosses at your company. So many of us today, what we need to do is to create another leader, another you, so that we can have this work for us. I need to transmit the knowledge that I've had in different industries to make sure that I have the next leader. That's what I need to do. I need to tell them the why. And as it comes to drivers, and I'll talk about drivers in conclusion, we need to tell our drivers why. We don't just need to give them things and technology. We need to tell them the why we're doing what we do. The biggest thing that's a passion for me is that when we do driver engagements, we need to tell them the why. We need to tell them and actually speak to them, not at them. The mistake we can do is that we can have robotic things that we do, normal processes that we follow every day. But I want to tell you from experience, the success I've had over the years is engaging with the people who are the front and center of our industry, our drivers, and saying, I'm going to speak to you, not at you, because you're a human being. You are worth it. You are special. And I need to get you home safe. We need to have processes. Those processes need to be defined. They need to be clear. They need to be understood. One of the things about processes I advocate for is RTMS, and I'm not going to belabor you about what it entails, but it's self-regulation that we can do to make sure we don't have the crashes like we had last year at the bridge. We regulate ourselves and achieve the highest quality. I want to tell you something this afternoon. The enemy of excellence is doing just good enough, just doing the bare minimum, just doing the basics. The technology side of people, process, and technology, maybe to share what we've done at SBV, we have partnered with Optics to install what's called motor vehicle artificial intelligence. And what this does from a dash cam perspective, it looks at the driver inside the cab and speaks and coaches him. You are distracted. You forgot to put your seatbelt. You are not looking far ahead. You are too close to the next vehicle. That is not to terrorize the drivers, but to get the buy-in, we tell them the why. We tell them we want to get you home safe. We want to see you if you're fatigued. We're doing it before it happens. How many know I do not want to go to the funeral of my driver? And listen, Meneer, listen, sis, I'm doing this because I care. That is why I'm installing this technology. And we've seen tremendous victory on it. I'm not going to believe this, but we know about telematics. In closing, I don't know how many minutes do I have left? 10 minutes. Okay, great. Eugene normally says I take off all the time. So I see Eugene, I become fast. So it's his fault. Don't blame me. Blame Eugene. So the question is, most of the time when I get on stage, people ask me, you have passion. Why do you do what you do? And just like Nikki, my why is that my father was a truck driver for over 40 years. And just like Nikki said, it's not something that people aspire to. They look down on it. I remember him delivering me to Dinwiddie High School in a fridge truck full of meat because I couldn't get to the school on time. And the other kids would laugh at me and say, your father is poor, he's just an ordinary truck driver. But that ordinary truck driver got me and my sister through school, and we are thankful for what he did. He imparted in us principles that mean something. He imparted us the pursuit of excellence, not just coasting, not just doing something not to get fired, but excellence and pushing yourself forward so that you can leave a legacy. Because that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave a legacy that is long lasting. I'm going to leave a legacy that will not be forgotten. As I work with SBV, as I said, we're in the cash in transit industry. The sad part about being that is that these men and women risk their life. SBV is the premier cash in transit company in the country. Every day, these men and women put on their bulletproof vests. They get their guns, they apply the regulation, they deliver cash. But you know what's the problem? Every day there's a son, there's another Jonathan, there's another Mapula. There are people at home waiting for them, thinking, is my father coming home today? Is my mom coming home today? Will she be a statistic? So they already have that pressure. I come in and say, I'm going to build the best vehicles I can. I'm going to implement the best procedures I can. I'm going to partner with people like Eugene, the best in training. I'm going to do all the things. I'm going to find fellow partners. Like I saw C-Track was here. I use C-Track. We're going to find fellow partners of excellence to partner with to get them home safe. That's the least I can do. Because every day, I know the pressure that it brings. Looking at the door as the hours go by, thinking, is my father Edward coming home safe? Your industry might not be that extreme, but I want to encourage you today as I close. You are responsible. It is incumbent upon you. So when we talk about inspecting vehicles, using technology, servicing the vehicles, everything in logistics that we do, it's not a job. It's a calling to get someone's father, someone's mother home safe. Thank you very much. I appreciate your attention. That's all that I have. Thank you very much.
Welcome back, everybody. We are going to have Marna Roots from Incorp's insurance broker. She's going to speak about, talking about truck financing options, insurance covers tailor-made for the trucking industry.
Thank you very much for the privilege to be here today. I'm really honored. My name is Marna from Inscorp Insurance Brokers, and I'm here to talk to you about insurance options. But I'd like to just tell you a little bit about myself. Thank you. Is that better? My introduction to the transport industry was quite a number of years ago when I worked for a company called Cargo Carriers, where in Sabi, the branch I was at, they did the logs that went from the plantation to the mills. But however, my passion for the transport industry actually started a couple of years later when I landed with another transport company, Roadway Transport. My husband at the time was a branch manager at Potgietersrus, and they had the contract for Needham Oil. So they had these huge tankers that transported the sunflower oil all over the country. And it was during one of those national strike actions when I actually landed in one of those vehicles with my husband. He was taking one of those trucks to Cape Town from Potgietersrus. And I don't know if you ever noticed when a tanker goes and starts driving, the whole truck does that. It was an experience of a lifetime, and I actually fell in love with the transport industry at the time. And I had a new look into the drivers and the challenges that faces the industry still today. But I'm not here to tell you more about the trip I had to Cape Town. I want to tell you more about insurance and the options available for you as a transporter. The first question, I think the most important question there is, if you talk about insurance, why insurance? Why is it important for you to insure your truck? And why is it important for you to insure the load that you carry on your vehicle? The answer is very simple. It is to protect your business on the road against certain risks, uncertainties. And if we look at these risks that we are facing every day, I mean, South Africa is not a very, crime is very high, but some of those risks, we look at the truck accidents. Accidents is really, really high. 9.4% of all fatal accidents involves heavy commercial vehicles. The financial loss to your business, it's huge. But it's not only a financial loss. You also need to look at your reputation. If you're not insured with the customers, or you don't insure your customers' property, you will have a huge reputation. Your reputation will be down. Apart from accidents, hijackings increased 139.3% between 2020 and 2022. That gives you about an increase of incidents from 1,202 to 2,875 incidents. The daily average on hijackings surged from 29 to 64 incidents per day. And then I think we can all remember the KZN riots and the looting that happened 2 years ago. It's still so fresh in my mind. I don't think any one of us was even remotely prepared for what had happened in KwaZulu-Natal. Insurance options that are available. I think most of you are know that there's your normal conventional cover, which is your traditional kind of cover where you have your all-risk cover. It covers you for theft, accidents, and whatever goes with that. And then one of the important things that I want to discuss with you today is the non-conventional insurance. And I don't think a lot of transporters are aware that there are so many different options that you can actually insure your vehicle. If you look at your non-conventional cover, I just want to quickly touch on that. You get a couple of them. You get your aggregate funding, deposit premium with a burner. Then you get an option of a profit share and captive funds. These are only a couple of them. There are so many tailor-made options and covers available. The one that I really work a lot on is your aggregate funding. And what is wonderful about this option of aggregate funding is the fund portion of your premium remains your money. That's your money. And then you earn interest, and it's also tax benefits that are available to you on that. So your fund portion, you can claim your VAT back on. And then you have a portion that is called catastrophe premium, and we normally refer to it as your pay-away premium. It's money that you're going to pay away and you're never going to get back. But the fund remains your money. Built into the aggregate funding is a stopper. So how does it work? When a claim falls within a predetermined stopper, your claim is paid out of your fund. Once your claim goes over your stopper amount, then the claim gets paid by the insurance company, which gets paid out of the catastrophe premium that you pay. Your catastrophe premium is very low in terms, if you compare it with your normal conventional insurance. The next one I want to touch on is your deposit premium with a burner. These are for your, I would say, your small to medium-sized fleets, where you would pay a deposit premium to the insurance company. For example, there's different variations. Let's use the example of 70-30%. Your 70% you pay to the insurance company as premium. And then they build in what it's called a burner. Say, for example, we use a 65% burner. So once your claims reach 65% of the premium that you pay to the insurance company, then only do you pay the 30% difference as premium to the insurance company. If your claims remains below your 65% of your premium, you will have a 30% saving on your premium. That is your money. And then basically a share that you get of the profit the insurance company would have made should you not reach the 65% of your premium. The profit share, almost the same, but really not really. You pay 100% of your premium to the insurance company. There's also a predetermined percentage built into your claims. So if your claims reach, say, 65% again, then it means that you will pay. No, let's do this way around. You pay 100% premium. If your claims reach less than 65%, you will have a profit, which normally it's determined before the time on what the profit share is going to be. So you get a percentage profit share of your premium. The next one I want to discuss with you is the 50-50 split. It's basically premium split into a 50% premium and a 50% fund. And how that works is it's normally ideal for your larger client, and it works like that. Once you have depleted your fund, then your policy becomes the normal conventional policy. So it will be the same as a normal conventional traditional policy. And then we have the captive funding. When you're, I actually want to just go back to slide 9. There are various options into the 50-50 split. It's not only the 50-50 split, I can split it in different percentages as well. Basically, with all these options, I think it's important to know that all these options are tailor-made for each individual company, because not all of us has got the same cash flow, it's got the same needs. Every individual company should be treated individually because they are different in the way they run their businesses. Your captive funding, it's when claims exceed your predetermined percentage of your earned premium, the costs will be paid out of your fund until the fund is exhausted, and thereafter the policy converts back to your normal conventional policy, which is almost the same as your 50-50 split. But not only do we need to insure the vehicle that we are using, it is important that we insure our clients' property that we carry on their behalf. there's a lot of transporters do not really understand the difference between the various types of load insurance that you get. The first one I want to talk to you about is the normal goods in transit cover, which is used mainly by your transporters. But what is important to know about your goods in transit cover is there needs to be a contract between the transporter and the owner of the goods for this policy to be activated. The policy can be taken out in two ways. The first one is an all-risk cover, and you also get a limited cover. So please make sure that if you want all-risk cover, that your policy wording says, your schedule says, that your policy is an all-risk cover policy and not limited cover. But again, very important is the contract between you and your customer. The next one is your carrier's liability. Now, carrier's liability is a liability kind of cover, and your transporter would normally use their standard terms and conditions as a contract between the transporter and the client or the customer. Important here, a very, very, very important thing to remember is when you have a carrier's liability policy in place, you are never ever allowed to admit liability if something happens. So according to, if your carrier's liability only pays out when you pay the damage that was caused to the load. It's not an expensive type of cover, but the reason for that it only pays out if your subcontractor has for some reason not being able to claim from his insurance company. Then we also have your cash in transit cover, which is very expensive. I don't think I need to explain why it's that expensive, but it is really very difficult to place. And I think we can all remember that video of that very, very frightening guy that was almost hijacked. And then I would like Cotton and Vaughan Lewitz and Megan Stokes. These are the people that you would normally speak to. And also just a little bit about us is when you are insured through InScorp Insurance, we have clients on our books since 1998, and I'm very proud to say that it's a service that we provide. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Hallo almal, ons het ons laaste spreker wat julle gaan toespreek vir vandag en ek is bly om te sê dat dit in Afrikaans gaan wees. Ek wil dit net baie duidelik maak in Afrikaans. Dit is Louis Stemmet van National Fleet Assist en hy gaan vir ons vertel oor padbystand.
Ja, sê, goeiemôre almal. Eerstens net baie dankie sê vir Renée en die Mega T span om my die geleentheid te gee. Ek dink dit is 'n wonderlike inisiatief wat hulle laas jaar begin het met die Mega T en elke keer lyk dit net lekkerder en beter. So baie dankie Renée vir die geleentheid. So Renée het vir ons nou geherken as 'n kenner in die industrie en gevra ons het so 'n bietjie praat oor sekere onderwerpe wat kliënte nou weet ondervind langs die pad, weet probleempies ensovoorts en dit is natuurlik waarna ons spesialiseer. So net gou vinnig, ek is Louis Stemmet, soos Renée gesê het, ek is die handelsmerkbestuurder vir National Fleet Assist. So soos genoem is ons 'n kenner in die industrie van padbystand en vlootbestuur en vlootonderhoud en al daai goedjies. En ons doen dit al vir meer as 50 jaar. So met al daai ondervinding en al die jare in die bedryf het ons al 'n paar kernonderwerpe uitgetrek en iets wat altyd belangrik is om met kliënte mee te praat. net iets om in gedagte te hou vir hulle en natuurlik ook hoe ons al daai probleme, as ek nou kan noem in Engels, tackle. So, eerstens wil ek ook net noem vir die interessantheid. Wanneer is? Okay. Skoning julle. Tegniese probleempie. Well, okay. So, net vir die interessantheid, ons hanteer omtrent tussen 2 en 2.500 padbystandgevalle 'n maand deur ons beheerkamer en ons stel interessante statistieke op en een van die statistieke net uit die interessantheid uit is dat meeste van, of nie meeste nie, baie van die padbystandgevalle kon verhoed geword het by die werkswinkel of deur ordentlike onderhoud. So dit is net iets uit ja, dis reg. Okay, dis reg. Ja, nee, maar dis okay. Nee, dis reg. Dankie. Ja, ekskuus julle, baie dankie. So, 'n paar van die punte wat ons net gou vinnig oor gaan raak, en net die belangrikheid van hulle en natuurlik hoe ons daai punte aanpak. Reaksiespoed. Nou ons weet natuurlik maak saak in watter kategorie van vervoer jy is nie, of jy nou net produk vervoer en of jy 'n busmaatskappy het en mense vervoer. Dis van kardinale belang dat indien jy 'n probleem optel langs die pad, dat daai probleem so vinnig as moontlik opgelos word. Want tyd is ongelukkig teen almal en jy verloor inkomste. Vragte wat laat is, as jy 'n busmaatskappy het, passasiers is teen jou, jy weet, so jy gaan definitief jou dienste gaan hulle nie meer vir jou gebruik nie. So dis een van die gevare daarvan. En natuurlik ook as die voertuig langs die pad staan, dit is gevaarlik vir die drywer daarso, hy kan dalk 'n botsing veroorsaak. En natuurlik weet ons ook misdaad is ook 'n enorme probleem in ons land. So hoe ons daai probleem basies oplos is, ons het oor die 500 lede wat gekoppel is aan National Fleet Assist. So hierdie lede is in meeste van die stede in Suid-Afrika en oor ons altyd iemand naby jou het, is die reaksietyd natuurlik baie vinniger. So dit is natuurlik hoe ons die, soos sê wat ons ook doen, en soos ek genoem het oor die 500 lede, ons het 'n baie ekstensiewe proses wat ons volg om lede aan boord te kry. So eerstens kyk ons kwalifikasies, ons kyk het hulle die nodige ondervinding om te doen wat ons wil hê hulle moet doen, waarin spesialiseer hulle, het hulle foutiewe vakmanskapversekering, en dit is ook maar 'n probleem wat ons al ondervind het.